Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Football House. Week 10 of the 2023 college football season is currently rolling, and we've got some picks for, this upcoming weekend, Friday and Saturday. Sam Basil joined alongside Jake Zimmer and Cole Hughes. And guys, I've been talking about it for 2 weeks now. We have finally arrived. The day was actually yesterday on Halloween, where we got the very first college football playoff rankings of the season. Right now, I'm going to pull up our own Football House Top 25, and we can just talk about, what the College Football Playoff Committee has put out here. So before we get into that, I'll just go through our own ranking that came out this past Sunday on house-enterprise/the blog, which you should be checking out every week. So we have got Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and Florida State. Then the next two out, we got Washington and Alabama. It seems like the playoff committee agrees with us in terms of the current field, but they do not agree in terms of the order. As of last night, announced on ESPN, the current order for the college football playoff is Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, and then Florida State. And then the next two out are Washington and Oregon. Personally, I felt like Ohio State at number one was a bit generous for the Buckeyes. I felt like, while they've got some very good wins on their schedule, they just don't feel like the number one team in the country. To me, they seem like a team that has an absolute chance of winning the college football playoff, and they should be there as of right now, but they don't feel like number one to me. Do you guys agree? Do you guys disagree? What do you think went into this decision?
Yeah, I'll give my thought here. I think I'll answer the first part, or the second part, which was what went into this decision. And I mean, you talk about sheer body of work, and I think the committee has two big wins on mind for Ohio State, and that's Notre Dame, a very low-scoring game. That was a great football game. They won at I think it was the last play that they won on the road on September 23rd. That was a 17-14 win, and then a pretty similar win against Penn State. I mean, does Georgia have two of those marquee wins? I don't think so. Does Michigan have two of those marquee wins? I definitely know they don't. Florida State, I mean, I can't say that for certain either. I'm looking at their schedule. Who was their big win at the beginning of the year? Is LSU. I guess LSU and Duke count in this scenario, but again, I think Florida State unanimously is sort of bringing up the rear of this four. I've been voting Ohio State 2 all year. I have had Georgia, maybe I've had Ohio State 3, but Georgia's been number one for me all year. But I get it. I get why the committee's picking Ohio State 1. It shocked me a little bit, but I sort of marinated around in my brain, and it's starting to make more sense why they're up there.
Yeah, Cole, what do you think about these?
Yeah, I mean, I've been taking Georgia and Michigan 1 and 2 all year, but I got to agree with Jake here. I think at this point right now, with what the committee's looking at, right, especially with strength of schedule and, big wins, I think you have to put Ohio State at number one right now. I think that's the right move. I read something earlier today that said Georgia has, out of all the FBS teams, they're 100th in strength of schedule. And then Michigan's behind them at 111. So, I mean, yeah, you have to give the respect to Georgia. They're back-to-back champs going for a three-peat this year. But the committee doesn't care about that. They care about what's happened this year and who are the four best teams. And, I think Ohio State has earned that as of right now. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes up, especially with what's coming down the line for Ohio State, right? If Michigan beats them in their annual rivalry matchup, because they're at 1, do they still stay in the top 4 in the College Football Committee's eyes? If they were at 3 or 4 right now and they lose that game, they're probably bumped out, and Washington or Oregon or Alabama, whoever it is, might slide in. But, with them being number 1 and, they've already had multiple tests that they've won. If they lose to Michigan, do they still stay in? That'll be intriguing to see how the committee handles that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this kind of, I mean, maybe for people like myself who feel like Georgia is still the best team in the country, I think this kind of goes to show that, like, it shows the inherent bias, right, that exists in a poll like the AP poll or even the college football or even the football house poll, right, where, we pick a number one preseason, and, for people like me, it kind of seems like sometimes I have the feeling like you got to be knocked off the number one position, right? It's hard for a team to come in and just take it from you. But like you said, Cole, I mean, everything that they've done this year, everything Ohio State has done to get that number one spot, they have done this season. And it's frustrating because I feel like, while I agree with that, we know what Michigan can do. We know what Georgia can do. And while I think, I think Georgia specifically has had a couple close calls this year, and they've had some injury struggles. It's frustrating that they don't put together the schedule that they should to show what they can do for moments exactly like this, right? So I feel like this could be a good wake-up call for some Power 5 schools, in the future, to kind of just keep trying to schedule the best schools possible. I mean, look, I think a perfect example of that is Florida State. Florida State schedules a pretty tough set of teams for themselves in the beginning of every year. I mean, that LSU win is one that I think last year, started off pretty good, but then kind of tapered off in the end of the season. But they've stuck in it. The Tigers have stayed around, and Florida's LSU win has continued to get, better and better on their resume. Same thing for Ohio State and Notre Dame. Notre Dame has floated around the top 15 for, pretty much the entire year, and right now they're 15th in the playoff committee's top 25. So again, I mean, it's like scheduling is, one of the most important things clearly for the college football playoff committee, who I feel like try to shroud themselves in a bit more mystery than they actually do. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. One question I have for you guys is Michigan at 3. Aside from what we've just been talking about with their scheduling, do we feel like maybe them not being in the top 2 has something to do with their uncertain future right now with all these scandals that are coming around the team? Do we feel like there's a chance that's going to kind of weigh on the team for the rest of the season, especially going into the Ohio State game?
Yeah, I mean, people are going to keep talking about it, but even the committee came out and said today, like, we're not worried about that. That's not a college football playoff committee issue. That's for the NCAA and Charlie Baker to handle. And they haven't really come out and said or done anything with that. So, I think they're just going to keep rolling, and I don't think they're going to let it try and be a distraction. But, another thing to think about now is with the Raiders job opening up. A lot of discussion over the last 24 hours about Jim Harbaugh. Is he going to be jumping from Michigan ship at the end of the year and going to Vegas to coach the Raiders, go back to the NFL? So that doesn't help, I don't think, especially with all the distractions and discussion that are surrounding Michigan's program right now with the whole scandal and Harbaugh being at the head of that. I just think that's more distraction. So, I mean, I think this team is built to block out the noise. It seems like, every year there's always discussions about Michigan and stuff like that. And I think they this is the year they really want to go to that next level and not just show up at the college football playoff, but prove to everyone that they are the best team in the country and that they are capable of winning a national championship. So I think they're putting more of their concern towards that rather than all these other outside distractions at this point.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's like, can the committee let that affect the rankings? No, right? I mean, they had to judge them as the football team, right? Now, if Michigan goes out and shits the bed against a good team, or they shit the bed against Ohio State, of course you might see them drop out to, who knows? Are they at that point still stuck in that 3 and then they fall out when they lose to Ohio State? There's a lot of dominoes are going to fall pretty soon just because we've got that. I mean, one of them's got to lose, right? So feel like all eyes are on that game for them.
Yeah, and I want to just rewind for a second, Basil, just talking about scheduling, like you were mentioning. I mean, you mentioned it, Notre Dame, one of those teams. I mean, they're ranked so low, but you have to remember Notre Dame is an independent, right? So they don't have any conference games where like they can just kind of roll on by within their conference. I mean, every game that they schedule is important, right? And I feel like a lot of teams, they're playing good teams like week in and week out. It's not like they can just go and play some nobody team, right? And then another team that I look at with scheduling, right, is Alabama. I mean, they scheduled Texas at the beginning of the year. They ended up losing, right? But that's their only loss this year. And, the college football playoff committee still has Oregon ahead of them, and I think a couple other teams. So it's just interesting to see, like, even these teams that do schedule non-conference opponents that are, high up there in the rankings, if they lose those games, how that plays into, these first opening rankings by the committee.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to circle back to Jim Harbaugh for a second, because you brought up something really interesting about, the possibility of him taking this now open Las Vegas Raiders job. I feel like it's something that kind of floats around every time there's been a head coaching vacancy in the past, maybe I want to say like 3-4 years. But it's surprising to me when I think about it in comparison to just how people talk about Jim Harbaugh, during his time as the head coach of Michigan. I feel like from the get-go, from the day he took that job, the expectations for him were so high. I mean, he was like the prodigal son, right? It's it's not super uncommon, but I feel like it's a unique situation where a star at a certain college comes back to coach at that college years later. And when they do that, I mean, it's not one of those things where, the coach is given kind of a leniency period, right? Where he has to, he gets time to learn the culture, immerse himself, in what that team's about, the mission statement, implementing his own philosophy. It's already there. It's already baked into him, and it's already baked into that program. And people have expected him to take Michigan back, to the top, to win a national championship. And he's gotten close, a couple times in these last couple of years. He's finally been able to, break that streak of losing to Ohio State. And so for him to leave Michigan, let's say they don't win the national championship this year. I mean, if you're Jim Harbaugh and you leave Michigan without a national championship after so many close chances, and you do it to go back into the NFL, what does that do for your legacy at Michigan? Now, look, I think there are some people who could say, hey, you know what? He had a really good run there. He brought them to the playoff, but without a national championship, are there going to be Michigan fans who give him some leniency there?
I'll let you take this, Cole, because I really don't.
Yeah,
I really don't have a good answer. It's something that I've thought about quite a bit. I don't know what his legacy is at Michigan if he leaves. I feel like it all really ends up on how this scandal gets resolved. Was Connor Stallions commissioned by Harbaugh to go out and do all this shit? Who knows until they're done with their investigation? If there's any malice that Harbaugh did, or you can point to him and sort of say, yeah, that's his fault. It's not going to end well, his legacy at Michigan. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole scandal that is one bucket, right? Of how his legacy is going to play out and how that kind of comes to a conclusion there. And then, the other aspect is, like you're saying, does he win a national championship there or not, right? And I think forget the scandal, put that aside for now, say that wasn't even in play, and Michigan doesn't win the national championship this year, and he leaves, right? I think his legacy would come down to, he was a great coach. I mean, he did well for Michigan. He got him there multiple times, which no one else was able to do, right? In years, right? When was the last time Michigan was a national championship contender before he showed up? I mean, I think of, the coaches before him, like Brady Hoke and some of these other guys, like they were kind of a laughing stock in the Big Ten for a while, right? I think his legacy is, he dominated against Ohio State while he's been there, right? And I don't know. It's interesting. Like he got them there multiple times, and if he gets them there this year again, like then you have to talk about also like Georgia, right? If it's Georgia and Michigan again, and Georgia beats them again, like he couldn't get over the hump of Georgia, right? People will say that, but at the same time, if Georgia are three-peat champions, I think that kind of takes away from how great Kirby Smart and what he's built in Georgia is, right? Because that would be crazy impressive by him to have that type of run. So, I don't know. It's interesting. I think a lot comes down to, this rivalry game that is great year in and year out between the Wolverines and the Buckeyes. Do they win this game? And, if they make it to the college football playoff, can they get over the hump? I don't think necessarily if they don't win that his legacy is a complete failure, but I do think people will be talking about, you had this opportunity, you had these great teams, you had all this talent, and you were right there, and you could never get the the prize. So it'll be a topic of discussion. And then again, like I said, if you bring back into the discussion the whole scandal, and if he is found to be guilty of cheating and breaking the rules, I think that just regardless of what happens, even if they do win a national championship, I think that hurts his legacy.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's like, you had all these players. What do you have to show for it, right? Couple of bowl wins. Awesome. Does that stack up as good for most Power 5 programs? Sure. Does it stack up for good and elite and the best of the best at Michigan? It does not. No. There are decades of history. I mean, what's the slogan there? It's those who stay win championships or something like that in Michigan. He's stayed. He's stuck around. Does he have a lot to show for it? Not in the great Bo Schembechler's eyes. I don't know.
Yeah, and look, I mean, if you take a look, it's not easy to be an ex-player that played at that university and then come back and be a coach. I mean, look at all the guys that have done it in other programs. I mean, you look at Scott Frost when he went back to Nebraska. That was an absolute disaster. Mario Cristobal's at Miami right now. They haven't really done much there. Jeff Brom, he's at Louisville. He's doing well, but they're not going to win a national championship with him there. So it's tough to go back to your alma mater and be the head coach just because the expectations are so high. And it's tough because especially if you had success as a player and won national championships as a player, the expectation amongst the fan base is you're going to come in as the head coach of this program and what it takes to win, to perform at that level and to, finish at the top of the mountain. And, unfortunately, a lot of these guys just can't do it. But, I do think that his run has been a great run in Michigan, but, they didn't hire him to get to New Year's Six bowl games or play in semifinal college football championship game. They hired him to be the number one team in the nation and to bring that trophy back to Ann Arbor. So, that's the bottom line. And, we'll see what happens and if he can pull it off this year.
Yeah, that's all great points. One thing that I really like that you said, if they come up against, Georgia, who's looking for the three-peat, right? It's one of those things, right, where when you look at it, I feel like we're kind of talking about this from maybe a Big Ten fan or specifically a Michigan fan's point of view, but it's one of those things, right, where everyone's the main character in their own eyes, right? Like he's got this whole narrative about his own legacy at Michigan, but he's going up against like what you said, what Kirby Smart's trying to do at Georgia, bringing them back into prominence. Whatever is going on at Ohio State, like it's one of those things where it's just never going to go your way just because you're the head, just because it's your own story. So I just find that super interesting. Another example, this is a different sport, but I feel like a lot of high expectations for being a former player at coaching your former school is also at Michigan. I think right now he's got a bit of a better he's not, his legacy isn't as complicated right now, but look at Juwan Howard, head coach of Michigan basketball, right? I mean, he is under immense pressure right now to make that school a winning program. And I'll say right now he's done a pretty good job, but again, I mean that pressure is always going to be there and it's never going to leave.
Yeah, like it's not good enough just to win playoff games and stuff. Like if Michigan's not in the Final Four in basketball, you've got people saying, well, why did we get rid of John Beilein or like those guys? So it's the same kind of deal. Is it good enough for Michigan standards? No. Is it good enough that to the naked eye you look at Michigan and say, yeah, they're a perennial top 4 program in football or whatever? Probably. But you think Michigan cares? You think their fans certainly don't. They're ravenous, right? They want this team and this program in all ways to win national championships. That's the expectation when you get to Ann Arbor. And that internal perspective, it's just not there right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things, right? I mean, this will be my last basketball point on our football show, but it's like, you look at Juwan Howard, right? 79-48 record. Elite 8, Sweet 16, NIT second round. You stick that resume in Conference USA, that's like one of the best coaches in a Conference USA program's history. But again, for Michigan, it's just not good enough. That pressure is always going to be there. That's not me knocking Juwan Howard because I think he's done a great job. But I'm sure, he says to himself, you got to keep climbing. You got to keep climbing.
Yeah, listen, you don't beat Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament. You don't beat Purdue when it matters. Who cares how you did, right?
People are always going to pull that up. But that pressure is also there for us on our weekly cards, right, guys? So I think we should get into those. Let's get into our picks. Starting off with you, Cole. You've kind of been our big dog this year. So I know I say it every week, but it's true. You've always got the good picks for us. So start off with your FBS and FCS locks of the week, go into your regular card, and then hold off on the game of the week.
Yeah, last week I wasn't a big dog at all. It was a very rough week. I'm just floating around 500 right now. So, hopefully I can get this changed up and start, consistently winning some games. But I'll start off with my FBS lock. I'm going against the Aggies per usual. I don't know why Jimbo's still on the sideline, but that's a whole nother discussion. I'm going to take Ole Miss -3 against them. Ole Miss having a pretty solid year. But the one thing that worries me about the Rebels in this game is their SEC matchups this year have all been really close games, right? They beat LSU by 6 points, which is a good win for them, right? But they only beat Auburn by a touchdown and Arkansas by a touchdown the last couple of in-conference matchups. So I'm a little worried about that, but they are at home. They're 5-0 at home this year. I think their offense is electric, and I just don't see A&M being able to slow them down. 3 points isn't that much. They've been winning by at least 6 or 7, so I think they do it again this week. So I'll take the Rebels for my FBS lock. FCS lock, I'm going to go with the Mercer Bears over the Citadel Bulldogs. The Citadel's 0-8. Pretty terrible year for them. I think they go 0-9. Mercer's been pretty good this year. They're 6-3, so I'll take them to win that game, money line. That'll be my FCS lock. And then as for my other picks, I got Notre Dame rolling with the Irish. Love what they've been doing ever since that Louisville loss. They've really gotten back on track. Sam Hartman looks great. They've been averaging 53 points over the last 2 weeks against USC and Pitt. So, I mean, the offense is putting up a ton of points, which helps when you have one of the best defenses in the country. With those two combinations, I mean, you're going to win games. So, really like their running back too, Audric Estime. He's at like just over 900 rushing yards on the year. So we'll see if they try to pound and ground against the Clemson Tigers in Death Valley this Saturday, and maybe he'll get over the 1,000 rushing mark for the season. So I'll take the Fighting Irish -3 there. I'm going to go Missouri. I'm going with them against the Georgia Bulldogs. So we've talked a lot about the Bulldogs in this show. I don't know. Something's telling me Missouri. I think that they're legit. I don't necessarily think that they'll win this game. I think Georgia's just a better team, but 15.5, a lot of points. Missouri's 7-1. You got to give them the respect that they deserve. They've been putting up points on the offensive side of the ball, averaging over 440 yards a game. They're 33.9 points per game. So, let's see how they can do against this, Georgia defense that has been dominant the last couple seasons. And also just the factor that, Brock Bowers is out. He just had that ankle surgery. He didn't play last week against Florida. They did all right without him, but I don't know when his return is scheduled for. But, not having your best weapon on offense hurts the Bulldogs. So I'll take the Missouri Tigers plus 15.5. I'm going to go Oklahoma in the Big 12 -6. Interstate rivalry game against the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Always a good matchup between these two programs, two schools that can put up, a ton of points. I like Oklahoma this week, especially after their, upset loss last week against Kansas. Good for Kansas. I mean, they've been playing, some great football, have really turned that program around. But I just don't see the Sooners losing 2 weeks in a row. I think Dylan Gabriel comes back and, lights it up against OK State. So I'll take them by a touchdown against the Cowboys. I'm going to go Minnesota -2 versus Illinois. They're at home. I like the Gophers there. The last two matchups that they've had, Minnesota and Illinois, Illinois has come away victorious, which is kind of surprising just because, Minnesota usually has a good team. PJ Fleck, hell of a coach up there in Minnesota. But, yeah, they've lost the last two matchups against Illinois. So I just don't see it happening for a third time in a row. So I'll take the Gophers -2 there. And then my final pick is going to be Fresno -3 over Boise State. Another team that's kind of flown under the radar, but has had a great year. Fresno State Bulldogs, a lot of impressive wins. It's interesting because Fresno and Boise, Fresno 7-1, Boise 4-4, but they're both 3-1 in the conference. And they're both fighting for that second spot behind Air Force in the standings. So this is an important game for both these teams. And, I just think Fresno is a better team. I think they put up a lot of points, 3 points, not that much. So I'll take the Bulldogs over the Boise State Broncos. And those are my picks.
Fantastic card, as always. A couple things that I really like that I have on my card as well. I like how you're talking about a lot of these matchups that I like to call, as we get into like week 10, 11, even like last week in week 9, we're really getting into what I kind of call these like pseudo playoff games, right? Where yes, they're games that have always been on the schedule, they're regular season games, but in the world of college football, one loss in the conference or in the division knocks you out of the conference championship game, right? I think we're going to see a lot of games like that. Boise State, Fresno State, I think is a perfect example. The Red River the Bedlam. It's they're right now in the Big 12. There are 5 teams that are 4-1 in conference play. That's got to get broken up. We're not going to have, I don't think fans want the participants of the Big 12 championship game being decided by, aggregate points against. People need to win games and people need to lose games. So I think, Oklahoma State is a perfect example of that. And then finally, I like to imagine that every time you rag on Jimbo Fisher, he kind of has like an Obi-Wan moment where he just like senses it thousands of miles away. Because I feel like you guys have that unspoken forced connection at this point, just fueled by your hatred for Texas A&M. Maybe it's not even hatred. Maybe it's just a desire to troll. But I feel like there's got to be some sort of connection there.
That got me. That was a good one.
Jake, what you got for us? I've been watching a lot of Star Wars lately, if you could tell. It's the winter time. It's getting cold. I'm on a kick.
I will say too, Basil, before Jake goes, it's a good point about the Big 12 with all those teams, because you do have OK State and Oklahoma, but you also have this week Texas versus Kansas State, and those are two other teams in the Big 12 that are fighting for those top spots. Kansas State was the Big 12 champion last year, and Texas obviously in the top 10. If they win out, they could still be in the playoff discussion. If they run the table and end up winning the Big 12 conference championship. So a lot of important games in that conference this week.
Yeah, and while we're on it, the fifth team in that little field is Iowa State, and they play Kansas, who obviously are kind of rolling right now off that win against Oklahoma. So say Kansas, like lightning strikes twice with Kansas, they beat Iowa State, and then we get two winners out of Texas and Kansas State, and then Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. That leaves 2 5-1 teams in the Big 12. So that leaves two clear frontrunners for the Big 12 championship game. And that's when things get really intense, because now the stage is set, and now it's up to teams to kind of dethrone them. So I think, if you're kind of rooting for some craziness here, I think we kind of want to see that, right? Jake, what you got for us?
Yeah, it's a good segue. I have a talk about Kansas here. I've actually got them +3 over Iowa State. That's one on my card that segues nicely. Look, Kansas is a good football team. Like they made the decision last year, hey, we're going to start taking football seriously again. And it's good wins. They were ranked for a decent chunk of the year. And I like what we're seeing from them so far this year as well. Some really powerhouse wins. Iowa State's profile is a little interesting, just to pull it up here. TCU, Cincinnati, Baylor, their recent wins. They do have a solid win over Oklahoma State. They got the doors blown off them by Oklahoma, and they played Iowa pretty well. They lost by a touchdown in one of those like stinker, 33-point games. So this matchup intrigues me, but I think it favors Kansas a little. They're riding a real good win. There's more on the line for Kansas, I feel like, to sort of prove themselves as like, hey, we're not just this fluke. Like we're actually, we should be considered a perennial top 25. So I'm going to keep riding Kansas here. I did not like betting them last year. Here I am. In the spirit of underdogs, I've got one more, and Colorado, Oregon State. I actually am going to take Colorado to cover this one. Think about Colorado's games. I am unfamiliar with what they did last week, but I keep thinking back to, it feels like they play every game so close, right? And I think Oregon State, yes, a better football team than Colorado is, but, I have a real interesting feeling that this will go, Colorado's at home. They've got their rowdy student section behind them again. I feel like, Oregon State might win this one, but Colorado's going to keep it real close. That's the prediction here. So those are the two underdogs. A couple overlaps with Cole's card here. Oklahoma, I'm going to keep trudging on ahead forward with them. Bounce back loss. They're probably all pissed. I think they blow the doors off Oklahoma State. I would even be comfortable if this were over 10, but I've got a 9 at the moment here. Notre Dame -3 over Clemson. Again, nothing new to add here. Clemson kind of stinks, and Sam Hardman has really bounced back nicely to Cole's point. Won't repeat anything there. Rest of the card here, this may be controversial. Ohio State -18 over Rutgers. I did not realize Rutgers had a really good record, too. Either 6-2 or 5-3, one of those. But I think Ohio State's just going to prove why they belong at number 1. That's what I think is going to happen this week. I've got Utah -11 over Arizona State. It's kind of similar. Utah, a couple losses that I'm sure they're going to want back. Arizona State has a couple decent wins, but I think Utah is going to prove why they belong in that sort of top 15 or 20 echelon there. Then Air Force. ranked Air Force, mind you. What are they, 20 in the AP, something like that? I'll take a -18 over Army. We've talked a lot about how Army is a bad team. Air Force is a good one. Whatever. I'm only worried because this may be a low-scoring game. Air Force tends to play really low-scoring games. The over-under is 31.5. So I'm just betting on like a 24-3 final or something like that. Hopefully we keep it nice and low-scoring and we go from there. And then I've got Tulane -17 over East Carolina because why not? Roll Tulane. I know didn't Rice cover against them last week or something like that? Maybe the week before. No, I just like Tulane because East Carolina's body work is not great this year. Locks, also similar to Cole. Ole Miss money line over A&M. I thought that was a joke when I first saw it. -3. Are you serious? At home, -3 for the Rebels? The same place they beat LSU this year?
Walking through that door.
God, I'm like, I thought that was a joke. Oh man, I hope that doesn't bite us in the ass though. It's like a trap.
He's already jinxed it. So somewhere Jimbo's like,
yeah. As soon as Basil prophesied the connection between you guys, it was game over. So Ole Miss money line. I'm uncomfortable taking the -3 because I think this could come down to the last play. FCS lock, Harvard, second place in the Ivy League over last place Columbia in Manhattanville, New York, where Columbia is. Are they Harlem technically? I don't know. Give me Harvard. Harvard money line. One of the best in the Ivy League over the worst in the Ivy League. Those are the locks and those are the card.
Love it. Just for clarification, Columbia's stadium is technically in Inwood, I believe. Really nice view actually. It's like
it's great from the highway. What is it? The Route 9? The highway down there that you can see the Columbia football stadium. Really nice view. Dog shit stadium. They need a renovation. They're in desperate need of one.
Hard to build a stadium in Manhattan, you know.
Zimmer, that Rutgers Ohio State game is very enticing, right? I know you took Ohio State, but Rutgers is low key 5-0 at home. They're 3-2. I mean, they're in the same division as Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, all these powerhouses. But if you flip them and put them in the Big Ten West, I mean, they're right up there with all those other teams that are fighting for that division. I mean, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, and Wisconsin are all 3-2 in the Big Ten West. And I mean, they're either going to be playing Michigan or Ohio State, it looks like. But, Rutgers, for being in the same division as all those Big Ten powerhouses, they're having a great year. So 18's a lot. It's risky.
I know. It's a lot of points. I don't think it's a lot for the number one team in the nation. And I think they're going to prove it this year. I will say, Ohio State wins this game and they cover. I think I'm probably flip-flopping some things in the poll next week and getting them out of 3. And again, it's Rutgers. It's fine. It's whatever. The committee's got me. They're in my head right now. They're so in my head, and I think we may see Ohio State number 1 if the committee, if they do win and do it in decisive fashion.
No, I agree. I mean, look, Rutgers is a good team. That I would even put that up as like a solid win if I was the committee like that.
Yeah, that's 3 solid wins if they win that game. That's Penn State, Notre Dame, and Rutgers. That's shit. That's more than Michigan's done to this point. That's significantly more than Michigan's done. And I'd argue that's more than what Georgia's done too.
And they don't send people to other teams' games.
That's true. They don't send, they don't have a guy dress up as a Chippewa,
That'd be a crazy, that would be a crazy scandal, right? Sticking cameras in the mascot costumes.
Pay off the mascot? Why didn't they just do that? Buy the mascot off.
No coaching staffs write that down. Don't do that. But it'd be kind of funny if you did.
Credit us.
Not legally. Not on the
guys at the football house told us we should do this.
Great card. Look, guys, I know I'm setting us up for failure for making fun of Texas A&M, but getting into my card, I'm also going to take Ole Miss -3 over A&M. They're just a better team. I'm sorry. I feel bad for A&M sometimes, but I don't feel bad enough to take them over Ole Miss.
Well, at
For
least
my
if we win, we can all hate Jimbo, and it won't just be me.
Yeah, then it just fuels the fire even more.
Yeah,
That's true. So for my FCS lock of the week, I'm going to take Bryant over Gardner Webb. The Battle of the Bulldogs. Well, Gardner Webb in this instance are the running Bulldogs, and I think they will be running from Bryant this Saturday. So I think that will be a fun FCS game. I know we've got some Bryant guys, at the house.
I was almost calling that game, but I had a couple conflicts, so I'll be back for Southeast Missouri State in a couple of weeks in Smithfield. Don't you worry.
All right, I like that. And getting into my regular card, I'm also going Air Force -18.5 over Army. Something you left out, I think you left out, Jake, was this game with an Air Force win, they will clinch the Commander-in-Chief's trophy because they've already got the win against Navy. So, whatever school beats the other two D1 military schools, you get that really cool triangular trophy. It'll be their second one in a row. So I got the Falcons -18.5. Also going Oklahoma -5.5 over Oklahoma State. Kind of a narrative nation pick. I think if you're a team like Oklahoma and you're on your way to kind of being, it's your last year in the SEC. You've already taken down Texas. You're trying to make a push potentially for the playoffs, but just trying to get a really good New Year's Six ball game to cap off a really good season. You can't do it without beating your in-state rival. So you got to go Oklahoma -5.5 over Oklahoma State. Ohio State Rutgers. I also really wanted to take Rutgers against the spread in this one, but it was just a little too scary. So I'm going to go with the over at 42.5. Syracuse -2.5 over BC. I just like that one. I think Syracuse is doing pretty good over these last couple of years. And then finally, I've got Tulane. The spread was at -17. I had them over East Carolina. It felt like a little boring to me. I felt like East Carolina is really bad. So I'm going to take a little Tulane teaser. And if you're throwing this on your card, maybe take the -20. I feel like they could do it. One thing that you mentioned, Jake, that I kind of want to get back into with Army Air Force is I do agree that Air Force -18.5 is tough because it's a low scoring game. They're low scoring teams. I've said this before. Army is a one note offense, right? So I think Air Force has a legit chance of shutting them out. So that's kind of what you got to hope for here. You kind of want to hope for a 21-0 game. But yeah, that's my card. Pretty similar to what you guys had, but yeah.
I like it. Another, interesting game that you mentioned, Basil, is that Syracuse BC game. BC is sneaky 5-3 right now. And for, guys being from the Boston area, New England area, I mean, BC is, no one even talks about them up here, college football, but, sneaky. Syracuse 0-4 in the ACC this year, but if they're going to knock anyone off, it's probably going to be the Boston College Eagles. So that'll be a fun one to watch.
I mean, I feel like we've been talking a lot about, the top 6 of the ACC so far this season. I feel like now we're going to just really get back into kind of the top 3, I would say. I mean, the ACC standings are a little bit weird right now. I feel like North Carolina and Duke both falling out of the top 25. And I know we were really excited about them, but it doesn't really seem like they have it this year. So it's really just back down to Louisville and Florida State. I mean, I know Virginia Tech's up there too, but look, I know they're 3-1 in the conference, but they're 4-4 overall. They got beat by Florida State by 22 points. So I just don't really see a path for them
Yeah, that's a weird conference right now because you got Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech at 3rd and 4th, and they're both 4-4. And then UNC, Miami, BC, Duke, NC State, all at 6-2, 5-3 behind those teams. So kind of weird how that's worked out in the ACC. But I agree with you. Florida State, Louisville, those are the two teams that are going to be there. It really just comes down to, can Louisville knock Florida State off? And prevent them from going to the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like we were so high on the ACC all year, and now we're really just back down to just kind of sleeping on the and sleeping until the conference championship game. But until then, let's get into our game of the week. It is Alabama versus LSU. Where Alabama Tennessee is the 3rd Saturday in October. This one is just, another simple name, the 1st Saturday in November. Very storied rivalry, one that ended in a pretty crazy fashion last year. In overtime, LSU beat Alabama 32-31. I think, if you forget the context behind that game, I just thought that was so interesting because I felt like LSU was, already on their way to having a bit of a down year. They had 2 losses going into that game. That first one against Florida State, and then they were kind of just fodder for Tennessee to, be a part of their Tennessee's short-lived college football playoff push. So they just, they kind of sank back and played the role of spoiler for Alabama. They were pretty much the final nail in the coffin for Alabama's playoff hopes. And right now, LSU, they don't feel like a playoff team. They feel like a good team. And Alabama obviously feels like a very, very slim chance at being a playoff team. But I think this game is going to be fantastic. It sets up a lot of SEC championship conversation. LSU, I know I'm saying they were a bit disappointing, but, they did make the SEC championship game, losing to Georgia. So this is both of these teams' ticket back in to some pretty big conversations. So how do we feel like this is going to go down? Starting off with you, Jake.
I don't know. I really don't know. Look, I'm off put by LSU's. Their losses have intrigued me quite a bit. Where did their defense go against Ole Miss is what I want to know. All right, I watched that game I watched the second half, start to finish, basically. Kind of casually watching it and saying, wow, oh my God, like they had this game in the palm of their hands. So to say that I'm worried, I would say that I'm a little worried that it might get out of hand again like that, where if this game just goes to a shootout, I think you might consider the advantage to be in Alabama's favor. Just with LSU's track record in those types of games. So when you look at LSU, I mean, their offense is really good, of course, right? They're 1st in total yards, they're 4th in passing yards. They put up a bunch of points. Alabama's stats are sort of, the stats would almost suggest the contrary, right? But I don't know. I just like the way Bama plays defense a little bit more. I like the totalness of their game. Like, I don't think we've seen really a Bama collapse necessarily. We've seen them, not play to their capability. But, what was their loss against Texas? It was 34-24. I don't think that was necessarily a collapse. I just think Texas was the better team, and they went out and beat them. Whereas LSU, they just sort of broke down almost entirely. So that for that reason, I'm going Bama -3. I'm not trying to think too much about this. And I think, hey, yeah, the LSU stats may be sort of in the offensive favor, but I'm liking Bama here.
Yeah, that's a fair point. One stat before, we got into Cole's breakdown. LSU has gotten their wins have been sparse, I would say, this decade. But the last time LSU has beaten Alabama by more than a touchdown was 2006. They won 28-14 in Baton Rouge. And since then, LSU's wins have been 41-34, 41-34, 24-21, 9-6 in overtime, 46-41, and then 32-31 last year, again in overtime. So Cole, do you think if LSU comes out on top in this one, it's going to be a one possession game?
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot of haymakers being thrown. It's going to be probably ugly, back and forth.
Oh, do you mean literal haymakers?
Or metaphorical? Yeah, that's
metaphorical, but maybe actual ones. You never know. It is SEC football, and those those boys down south like to have some hospitality sometimes, but can also be mean on the gridiron. So you never know. But
it means more.
But no, yeah, I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's probably going to come down to the end of the game. Maybe even a field goal. I don't know, but I do like Alabama in this. I just think Jake made a great point, right? Like talking about this season, but I think it goes even further than that. Like Alabama hasn't really crumbled, right? Like this season. But overall, they haven't made the college football playoff or won a national championship in the last couple of years, but it's not like they have been a bad team. I mean, they've still been right there, like on the outside looking in, right? I mean, they're still dominant. It's not like Clemson, like Dabo and Clemson right now, they're falling apart. Like that is not the team that it once was. I think Alabama still has the capacity and the opportunity to be that team. And like you said, Basil, I mean, this game has huge implications for who's going to go to the conference championship in the SEC. I think right now, Alabama has a path to get back into the college football playoff. Although it is minimal, it is small, a lot of things have to go their way. It's there, right? If they beat LSU, they work their way to the SEC championship. They get to see Georgia, and in a winner takes all one game, anything can happen, right? Anyone can win that game. So if they beat Georgia, knock off Georgia, hey, they might be back in the college football playoffs this year. Who knows, right? They do only have that one loss to Texas, and if that's your only loss in the season, it's pretty good, right? So I don't know. I think that the way that Nick Saban approaches, every year in, year out, it's like, what can we do? It's about us. Forget about, what everyone else is doing. It's, can we handle our own business? And obviously they're not looking ahead to, the postseason or anything like that, because that's not how Nick Saban is. It's week by week mentality, win that week, right? But, it's in the back of their minds. You'd be lying if you were a part of the Alabama football program and you said you weren't thinking about it, right? I mean, that you still have a slim chance. And I mean, these are the games that you got to take advantage of. So, I don't know. I just like the rolling tide. I think they're at home. I think they win this game. It's ugly. It's close, but I think that they do cover. I do have them at -3. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it comes down to probably, the last possession or, something like that. Maybe even they push and win by field goal, but I do like 3. I'm comfortable with that, with their defense. I think their defense holds LSU, and their offense does just enough to win this game.
And so, I feel like I feel like the defense, right? We're expecting Alabama's defense to kind of, control the tempo for Alabama and keep them in this game. But what about Milroe? I mean, what do you expect out of him?
I mean, look, the kid, after the Texas loss, and then, it was kind of a disaster at the beginning of the year. They didn't know what they wanted to do, Alabama. It was like they didn't have an identity because they didn't have a quarterback, right? Since then, he's been in there, and I mean, look, he's winning games. I think he's not your typical Alabama quarterback that you've seen the last couple of years with, Jalen Hurts or Tua or those types of guys, even Mac Jones. But I would put Jalen and Tua in a different category than even Mac. But look, I mean, Alabama's won plenty of national championships back in the day with quarterbacks that were just game managers, and they relied on their defense, and, they had running backs or, one stud receiver that could get it done. And the quarterback just did his job and didn't make mistakes, didn't turn the ball over, didn't put them in bad situations. So I think if Milroe does that, look, they can win this game fine. I don't think he has to do anything extravagant or, pull anything out of his hat. I think that as long as he does what's asked of him and he doesn't turn the ball over or make stupid decisions, I think they're just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of second that, right? But it's weird territory for Alabama because you look at their past 5 years of quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones was really good at Alabama. They expect their quarterbacks to be superheroes, and I think that's what tripped them up earlier this year. It's like, well, what do we do? Milroe's good, but he's not this superstar. He's not going to be a top 10 draft pick in the near future. So I think it sort of throws off Alabama's game, but at the end of the day, they're still a well-oiled machine, right? They've got enough weapons where he doesn't have to be their superhero to win them football games. So that's sort of like I trust the kid that he's going to make at least the right plays and not screw his team out of any opportunities to put the game away while they can.
And look, I think people forget he's only a sophomore, right?
Yeah.
Wait until next year. I think this kid's going to have an unbelievable year with them next year. This is his first year really, being the general of that offense. And, you're playing in the SEC. I mean, it's not like you're playing these teams that you can just, storm right over, right? I mean, there's a lot of good football teams, a lot of good defenses in the SEC. So, I'll be excited to see how he progresses and how he keeps going. But, as for this game this weekend, I think that's what it is. I think just be a game manager and, don't put yourself or your team in bad situations, and you should be all right.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned that superhero streak, right, Jake? Because you're absolutely right. And you're also right, Cole, in that, yeah, we have seen game managers. And when you take those 2 points and kind of combine them together, that superhero streak was only like 5-6 seasons. I mean, I know like that's like, if we're talking college football, like that's, an undergrad's time at a school. So yeah, there are, like recent Alabama graduates who, if they only followed Alabama, in some weird world where you start following Alabama when you step on the campus the first day, and then you stop once you graduate. Yeah, that's all you know about Alabama quarterbacks. But I mean, I feel like in our lifetime, since I've been watching college football since, the late 2000s, early 2010s. I mean, look, what about like AJ McCarron? I would call that guy a game manager. You know what I mean?
Greg Mackel.
Yeah, exactly. Greg Mackel. Like it's like, we've seen it. We've seen this, like the recency bias to just expect, Alabama to have a Jalen Hurts, a Tua, or a Mac Jones it must be a really severe case for people who have something like that. So again, I think Milroe's good. I think he's a game manager, but I also think he's got a great arm, and combined with that defense at home. I've also got Alabama -3 here. I think that's gonna, wrap it up for this portion of the show. But are there any other last minute picks that you guys you'd want to get in here?
I don't know about picks, but just looking at some games this week. I mean, Kansas State, Texas, we mentioned it. That's a good game to watch. What else do we got here?
I got one off the cuff. Watch out for Kentucky. They lost 3 straight games. Remember them?
Yeah.
You guys remember Kentucky? And
That's a good thing. So
they were everyone was super high on them. They're playing Mississippi State this week. They're that actually might be on my card as well, -3. Their stretch was real tough these past couple weeks. It was Georgia, Tennessee, and I just lost. It might have been Florida in the second or the third one. Yeah, it was Florida. They might make a splash this week.
I like Penn State at Maryland. That's a good game too. Maryland's had a great year. Penn State has to go there, so keep an eye out on that one. But a lot of good games. Washington and USC. We haven't even talked about that, right? Yeah. I mean, Washington is number 5 in the country. They're on the outside looking in, college football playoff. USC, I mean, they still have Caleb Williams. I know that they've been struggling, but I mean, they're 7-2. So that's no guarantee for the Huskies, and they have to go into the Coliseum on Saturday. I mean, that's no small task. So, some good games to keep an eye out on in the top 25. We're getting down to the wire, boys. I mean, it's starting to get fun. We're starting to see how everything's going to shape up, and this is the best time of the year.
Yeah, love it. Best time of the year for college football. Best time of the year to be watching the Football House. So that'll do it for week 10 of the Football House show 2023. Hope you guys, hope your picks end up doing pretty well. I hope our picks end up doing pretty well. And so keep following us. We'll keep putting this out every Wednesday or Thursday on the Football House Twitter, the Football House, the House Enterprise Twitter, the House Enterprise YouTube, and next day on house-enterprise.com/the blog. So until then, we'll see you guys next time.